The rain pounded against the windows of my small cafe in downtown Portland as I prepared to close for the night. Thunder crashed overhead, making the old building tremble as I wiped down the counters and calculated tomorrow's inventory needs. At 20 years old, I owned little beyond this struggling business my grandmother had left me in the apartment upstairs. Lightning illuminated the darkened street outside, and in that brief flash, I caught sight of a small figure huddled beneath the cafe's striped awning. My first instinct was caution. This wasn't the safest neighborhood after dark, but something about the hunched shoulders and obvious distress made me unlock the door. The wind nearly tore it from my hands as I called out to the shadowy form. The boy couldn't have been more than 7, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, clothes soaked through as he clutched a backpack to his chest. When he lifted his face to mine, I was struck by the unusual composure in his eyes. Not quite fear, but a wariness that seemed far too old for his years. His expensive sneakers and designer raincoat seemed wildly out of place in this part of town. "Are you lost?" I asked, kneeling to his level while rain dripped from the awning onto my shoulders. He didn't answer immediately, instead studying my face with unsettling intensity. Finally, he gave a single, tight nod, his knuckles white where they gripped his backpack straps. "My name is Grace," I offered, standing to gesture him inside. "Let's get you warm and dry, then figure out how to get you home." The cafe's warmth enveloped us as I locked the door, the storm suddenly muffled by old brick walls and steamed-up windows. Something in the boy's careful movements and wary eyes made me wonder what he was running from. He sat perched on the edge of a chair while I fetched a clean dish towel for his hair and made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. "I'm Theo," he finally offered, accepting the mug with surprisingly formal thanks. His accent was slight but distinctive, Eastern European perhaps. "I was with Francis at the museum," Theo explained after his first sip, his voice gaining confidence. "There was a loud noise, people running. We got separated." He looked down at his mug, avoiding my eyes. "Francis works for my father. I checked my phone for news of any incident downtown, finding reports of a fire alarm at the art museum that had caused an evacuation. We should call your parents," I suggested gently, but Theo's reaction was immediate. He stiffened, eyes widening as he clutched his mug tighter. "My father doesn't like phones," he said carefully, choosing each word with precision that seemed rehearsed. "And I don't know his number. Francis has it." The storm intensified, rain now mixed with hail that clattered against the windows like thrown pebbles. "I live in Westwood Heights," he offered after a moment, naming the city's wealthiest neighborhood, an exclusive enclave of mansions located across town, the White House with black gates and stone wolves. His description was oddly specific, as if he'd been taught exactly how to identify his home. "I'll help you get home," I told Theo, gathering my keys and raincoat. His expression shifted between relief and uncertainty, small fingers fidgeting with his backpack strap. Outside, the storm had temporarily abated, leaving puddles reflecting fractured streetlight patterns. My ancient Volkswagen sputtered to life after 2 attempts, the heater coughing out lukewarm air as Theo fastened his seatbelt with practiced precision. He sat unnaturally still for a child his age, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings as I navigated empty streets. 20 minutes into our drive, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled alongside us at a traffic light, lingering too long when the signal changed. Theo ducked down in his seat instantly, a move so practiced it spoke of repeated drills and warnings. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, heart suddenly pounding as the vehicle finally accelerated away. Westwood Heights appeared like a separate world after we passed through its ornate stone entrance. Sprawling mansions set back from immaculate streets, security cameras disguised as decorative elements. Theo's posture changed subtly as we entered his neighborhood, shoulders straightening as if resuming a role he momentarily forgot. "There," he pointed suddenly, indicating a driveway ahead flanked by imposing stone wolves, their carved features eerily lifelike in the glow of hidden spotlights. A massive white colonial mansion loomed behind wrought iron gates that looked designed to withstand a small army. The property screamed old money and extreme privacy, with no visible house numbers or nameplates. As we approached, the gates began opening automatically. My car had obviously been spotted and recognized as carrying precious cargo. 3 identical black SUVs were parked in a semicircle before the main entrance, where men in dark suits stood despite the lingering rain. "Thank you for bringing me home," Theo said formally, suddenly sounding years older than his age. His hand reached for the door handle, then hesitated. "My father will want to thank you personally." There was something in his tone, not quite warning, not quite apology. Before I could respond, the passenger door was opened from outside by a mountain of a man wearing an earpiece and a carefully neutral expression. He assessed me with a single glance that felt like being x-rayed, then focused on Theo with visible relief. I stepped out of my car slowly, acutely aware of the multiple sets of eyes tracking my movements. The mansion's front door opened, spilling warm light across the circular driveway. A woman emerged first, elegant, severe, clipboard in hand, followed by a man whose presence seemed to change the atmosphere. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 27, with dark hair cut precisely, wearing a tailored suit that would have looked excessive on anyone else. His face was all angles, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that assessed everything with calculating efficiency. "Theo," the man said, his accent slightly thicker than his son's, voice carrying quiet authority that needed no volume to command attention. His eyes shifted to me, intense and unreadable, studying me with unsettling thoroughness. "I am Maxim Volkov," the man said, extending his hand with precise formality. "You have my gratitude for bringing my son home safely." His grip was firm, controlled, his gaze never wavering as he studied my reaction to his name. I didn't recognize it, but something in the way the security staff tensed suggested I should have. "Grace Bennett," I replied, suddenly conscious of my rain-soaked appearance against their polished perfection. It was no trouble. I couldn't leave him out in that storm. Maxim's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he glanced at his son. "Please come inside. The weather is worsening again." It wasn't a request, but a statement delivered with such authority that I found myself following him through massive double doors before I could consider declining. The interior was a study in understated wealth: marble floors, vaulted ceilings, art pieces that looked like museum quality. Yet there were surprising touches of warmth: a child's drawing framed beside a Renaissance painting, well-worn books stacked on an antique side table. Theo was whisked away by the clipboard woman, casting one last unreadable glance over his shoulder before disappearing up a sweeping staircase. I stood awkwardly in the entrance hall, acutely aware of my dripping coat and mud-splattered boots against the pristine floor. "You own the cafe on Harmon Street," Maxim stated rather than asked, leading me into what appeared to be his study. Wood-paneled walls lined with books in multiple languages created an atmosphere of cultured intellect, at odds with the tense security presence I'd witnessed outside. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and without asking, a silent staff member appeared with a tray bearing 2 crystal glasses and an amber-colored liquid. "Theo told me where he found shelter," Maxim continued, his accent wrapping around the words with practiced precision. "It was lucky I was still open," I said, accepting the offered drink without tasting it. The museum evacuation must have been frightening for him. I watched carefully as a shadow crossed Maxim's face, brief but unmistakable concern, followed by something harder to define. "My son's bodyguard will be seeking alternative employment," he replied, after a measured pause. The casual way he referenced a 7-year-old having a bodyguard, and the implied consequences for the man who'd lost him, sent a chill through me despite the room's warmth. Maxim studied me with unnerving intensity before speaking again. "Theo struggles with his studies, English particularly. His tutors lack connection with him." The statement hung in the air between us, its purpose unclear until he continued. "You have a literature background. I see the books you sell. I'm working on my degree in education," I admitted, wondering how he knew about my cafe's modest book selection. The implication that he'd noticed my business before tonight was unsettling. "I teach part-time at the community center on weekends. Perhaps you would consider tutoring Theo," he suggested, with the confidence of someone unaccustomed to refusal. 3 afternoons weekly. The compensation would be substantial. It wasn't really a question, and something in his tone suggested declining wasn't truly an option. I should have said no. Everything about the situation screamed warning, from the armed security to Maxim's carefully controlled demeanor. Yet something in Theo's solemn eyes had touched me. "I'd need to work around my cafe schedule," I heard myself say. "Arrangements can be made," Maxim replied, satisfaction briefly warming his expression. He moved to his desk, retrieving a business card so minimalist it contained only a phone number embossed in silver. "My assistant will contact you tomorrow with details." As he handed me the card, our fingers brushed briefly, an unexpected jolt of awareness passing between us. Maxim's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication he'd felt it too. A discreet knock interrupted the moment, the door opening to reveal Theo in dry clothes. The boy appeared transformed, spine straight, expression carefully neutral, a perfect miniature of his father's controlled demeanor. Only his eyes betrayed him, lighting up briefly when he saw me still there. "Did you thank Ms. Bennett properly for her assistance?" Maxime asked. "Yes, father," Theo replied with formal precision. "Ms. Bennett has agreed to help with your English studies," Maxime informed him. For the first time, I glimpsed genuine emotion on the boy's face, surprise followed by cautious hope. I was driven home in a black SUV identical to those parked at the mansion, the silent driver navigating the storm-lashed streets with effortless precision. Through the tinted windows, Portland looked different somehow, darker, full of shadows I'd never noticed before. Sleep evaded me that night, my mind spinning with questions about the Volkovs. Morning brought uncomfortable answers when I finally Googled the name that had seemed to carry such weight. News articles detailed suspected connections to organized crime, allegations never proven in court. My finger hovered over my phone, ready to call the number and decline the tutoring position. Then I remembered Theo's eyes, that careful, controlled wariness giving way to momentary hope. A child shouldn't have to perfect such emotional discipline at 7 years old. The cafe was unusually busy that morning, as if the universe was conspiring to distract me from my decision. Around noon, a sleek town car parked outside, and a woman I recognized as Maxime's clipboard-carrying assistant entered, bypassing the line with confident purpose. "Ms. Petrovna," she introduced herself crisply, sliding a manila envelope across the counter. "The contract and schedule for Master Theo's tutoring." Her tone made it clear she expected immediate acceptance, the matter already settled in her employer's mind. Inside were documents outlining payment that made my eyes widen, 5 times what I'd expected for 9 hours weekly. Also included was a non-disclosure agreement with legal language that seemed excessive for tutoring arrangements. My hesitation must have shown. "Mr. Volkov values his privacy," Ms. Petrovna stated flatly, her accent more pronounced than Maxime's. "The compensation reflects both your educational services and your discretion." The implication was clear. I wasn't just being paid to teach Theo, but to keep silent about anything I might observe. 2 weeks into my new arrangement, I'd fallen into an unexpected rhythm. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons found me in Theo's private study room, surrounded by books and educational materials that would make any public school teacher weep with envy. The boy proved to be brilliant but cautious, testing my reactions before allowing himself to fully engage. Slowly, his formal facade cracked, revealing glimpses of a child who collected rocks, loved astronomy, and had a surprising talent for drawing detailed architectural sketches. Maxime often observed our sessions from the doorway, his presence announced only by the subtle shift in Theo's posture. During these moments, the boy retreated back into careful precision, his spontaneity replaced by performance aimed at earning his father's approval. After our 3rd week, I found Maxime waiting in the hallway after Theo had been escorted to his martial arts lesson. "Walk with me," he suggested in that way that wasn't really a suggestion. The mansion's east wing opened onto manicured gardens, just beginning to bloom with spring. "My son is different with you," he said, after we'd walked in silence along stone pathways. "He speaks more freely, laughs sometimes." There was a question in his observation, though he didn't phrase it as such. Maxime Volkov didn't ask questions, he extracted information. "Children need space to express themselves without fear of judgment," I replied carefully, wondering if he would take offense. To my surprise, Maxime nodded, a shadow crossing his features as he glanced toward the horizon, where dark clouds were gathering. The peaceful moment shattered as a security guard approached rapidly, speaking urgent words in Russian. Maxime's expression hardened instantly, his hand moving to my elbow with protective instinct. "You need to leave now," he said, all warmth vanishing from his voice. "What's happening?" I asked, alarmed by the sudden tension crackling through the air. Guards appeared throughout the garden, hands inside jackets where weapons were undoubtedly concealed. Maxime's grip on my arm tightened as he guided me swiftly toward the house. "Business complications," he replied tersely. "Victor will drive you home and ensure you arrive safely." The emphasis on safely sent a chill through me as Maxime escorted me through a side entrance where a car was already waiting, engine running. The next morning, I opened my cafe to find an unmarked envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a warehouse fire across town, with 3 words handwritten in the margin. "Volkov is next." My hands trembled as I read the implied threat. I should have gone to the police, but instinct told me that would only make things worse. Instead, I called the silver-embossed number, reaching Ms. Petrovna's voicemail. Less than 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside, and 2 suited men entered my cafe. "Mr. Volkov requests your presence immediately," the taller one stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request I could decline. The cafe sign was flipped to closed before I could protest, and I found myself being driven through Portland's morning traffic toward Westwood Heights. Maxime was waiting in his study, surrounded by men speaking rapidly in Russian. They fell silent as I entered, several pairs of eyes assessing me with suspicious precision. "Leave us," Maxime commanded, and the room cleared instantly, leaving us alone with tension thick enough to touch. "You received a threat," he stated flatly, holding out his hand. I placed the newspaper clipping in his palm, watching his expression harden as he read the 3 ominous words. "The Baranov family," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "They're growing bolder." He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds where security personnel had doubled since my last visit. "They're trying to get to me through those He paused, searching for the appropriate word. "Those in my orbit, including you." His gaze returned to me, assessment shifting to something that might have been concern. "You and Theo need to leave Portland immediately. I have a property in the mountains, isolated, secure. You'll be taken there tonight while I handle this situation. I can't just abandon my cafe. My life," I protested, even as I recognized the seriousness of the threat. Maxime's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened momentarily. "Your cafe will be protected. Your life is what I'm trying to preserve." The cold efficiency with which he dismantled my objections was both terrifying and oddly comforting. "Theo has already been moved. He's asking for you." This final statement, delivered almost reluctantly, was the one that silenced my protests. The boy needed someone familiar in this chaos. Darkness had fallen by the time we departed, a convoy of 3 identical vehicles with tinted windows leaving the mansion through a rarely used service entrance. I sat beside Maxime in the middle SUV, his profile illuminated by passing streetlights as we headed toward the foothills. "Who are the Baranovs?" I finally asked, breaking the tense silence that had stretched between us. Maxime's jaw tightened, his hands clasped too perfectly still on his knees, a controlled man containing something volatile beneath the surface. "Former associates with ambitions beyond their capabilities," he replied after a measured pause. "They believe eliminating me will allow them to take control of certain business interests." The clinical way he discussed potential assassination was chilling, as if discussing weather patterns. The mountain property materialized out of the darkness after 2 hours of winding roads, not the rustic cabin I'd expected, but a modern fortress of glass and stone nestled among towering pines. Security measures were subtly integrated into the design, reinforced windows, camera positions disguised as architectural elements. Theo was waiting inside, his small face lighting up when he saw me enter behind his father. He ran to me with uncharacteristic abandon, wrapping his arms around my waist. "I knew you'd come," he whispered against my sweater, his usual composure cracking to reveal the child beneath. "We'll be safe here," Maxime said, watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. His phone buzzed, and he stepped away to answer, his voice dropping to a tense murmur. I caught fragments, perimeter secure, and no negotiation, before he disappeared down a hallway, leaving me with his son and the weight of decisions that had brought us to this remote sanctuary. Days passed in strange domesticity. Theo and I continued our lessons in the morning sunshine of the Mountain Home's solarium, while Maxime conducted business from a heavily secured office, emerging periodically with shadows under his eyes that grew darker each day. I learned more about Theo during these secluded days than in all our previous sessions combined. His mother had died when he was 3. "In an accident," he said with practiced vagueness that suggested the truth was more complicated. He'd been raised by a rotation of nannies since then. On our 5th evening, I found Maxime alone on the terrace, staring at distant city lights with a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. "The Baranovs burned your cafe last night," he said without preamble, his voice carefully stripped of emotion. "No one was hurt. Insurance will cover it." The news should have devastated me, yet I felt oddly detached, as if that life belonged to someone else now. "Is this how you live?" I asked quietly, moving to stand beside him at the railing. "Always waiting for the next attack? The next loss?" His profile was sharp against the night sky, vulnerability briefly visible before his mask settled back into place. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he admitted, fingers tightening around his glass. "My father built an empire through fear. I wanted to legitimize it through respect." A shooting star streaked across the sky, and I was struck by the absurdity of witnessing something so beautiful while discussing something so dark. Theo deserves better than this life, I said, voicing the thought that had haunted me since the night I found him in the storm. Yes, Maxime agreed, surprising me with his candor. That's why I've been working to extricate us from certain entanglements. The Baranovs discovered my intentions. They see it as weakness to exploit, rather than evolution to respect. The bitterness in his voice spoke of years of frustration. Security alarms shattered the moment, red lights bathing the terrace, as guards materialized from hidden positions. Maxime's transformation was instant, vulnerability vanishing as he pulled me toward the house with one hand, the other reaching inside his jacket to withdraw a gun I hadn't known he carried. Breach at the east gate, a guard reported in accented English, weapon already drawn. Maxime nodded once. Decision made in seconds. Contingency protocol, he ordered. Get Theo and Ms. Bennett to the panic room. No one enters without my direct authorization. Before I could process what was happening, I was being hustled through hidden passages within the house, Theo already waiting in a concrete room disguised behind a bookcase in the library. His face was pale but composed, a child too accustomed to emergency procedures. Dad has a plan for everything, he informed me with forced bravery as the heavy door sealed us inside. The room contained supplies for weeks, multiple communication systems, and surprisingly, a shelf of children's books. Theo selected one without looking, hands trembling slightly despite his calm facade. "Will you read to me?" he asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I pulled him close on the small sofa, opening the book to find dog-eared pages and margin notes in what must have been his mother's handwriting. The discovery humanized Maxime in unexpected ways, a grieving widower who preserved these small connections to his lost wife. Gunfire echoed distantly as I read about magical wardrobes and talking lions, Theo gradually relaxing against me despite the danger outside. Hours passed in suspended animation, until finally the communication panel blinked green, and Maxime's voice filled the room. "It's over. You can come out now." The main hall was a battlefield aftermath, broken glass, bullet holes in walls, furniture overturned during the fight. Maxime stood amid the chaos, his suit jacket missing, shirt sleeve torn and stained with what I realized with shock was blood. Theo ran to him, stopping short when he noticed his father's injury. "It's nothing," Maxime assured him, kneeling to eye level despite what must have been significant pain. "Just a scratch." The tenderness with which he touched his son's cheek contrasted sharply with the violence evident around us. "The Baranovs won't trouble us again," he added, meeting my eyes over Theo's head. I didn't ask what that meant, understanding there were boundaries to what I wanted to know. Dawn was breaking as security teams cleared the property, removing evidence of the night's events with practiced efficiency. Maxime found me in the kitchen, making tea with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "I'm sorry you were pulled into this," he said, leaning against the counter with carefully controlled exhaustion. The wound on his arm had been professionally bandaged, but pain lines bracketed his mouth. "You deserved better than to see this side of my world." "What happens now?" I asked, passing him a steaming mug that he accepted with his good hand. Outside, the first birds began their morning songs, incongruously peaceful after a night of violence. Maxime sighed, momentarily allowing his perfect posture to slump. "Now I accelerate certain plans," he replied, calculating even in vulnerability. "I've been establishing legitimate businesses for years. Real estate, technology investments, art acquisitions, clean enterprises to transition away from my father's legacy." His eyes met mine. Searching for judgment he seemed surprised not to find. 3 weeks later, we returned to Portland, not to rebuild my destroyed cafe, but to pack my remaining possessions from my apartment. Maxime had offered a position I never could have anticipated, private tutor to Theo, but also advisor on his charitable foundation focusing on educational access for disadvantaged youth. A convenient cover, I had challenged when he first suggested it, still uncertain of his true intentions. His response surprised me. A genuine laugh, brief but transformative. Convenient, yes, but also genuine. Everyone deserves a second chance, including me, perhaps especially me. The foundation offices occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, with views stretching to the mountains where we'd found unexpected connection during those dangerous days. Theo thrived in his new international school, his English improving rapidly as his shoulders gradually lost their perpetual tension. Maxime's transformation was more complex, the weight of his past creating occasional shadows I doubted would ever fully dissipate. Yet I witnessed daily efforts to build something better, legitimate deals replacing shadowed transactions, transparent philanthropy replacing protection rackets. Our relationship evolved in careful stages, professional respect becoming friendship, friendship deepening into something neither of us named aloud. The first time he kissed me was after a foundation fundraiser, moonlight silvering his usually severe features into something softer, more hopeful. "I don't deserve this second chance," he murmured against my hair later that evening, as we stood on his penthouse balcony. "But I'll spend every day earning it. For Theo, for the foundation." His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. "For us, if you'll allow it." The question in his voice revealed vulnerability few ever witnessed. "We all deserve redemption," I replied, thinking of the frightened boy in a storm who had led me to this unexpected life. Sometimes it finds us when we least expect it. As if summoned by our thoughts, Theo appeared in the doorway in pajamas, a book clutched to his chest, no longer seeking shelter from a storm, but offering us the chance to become the family none of us had dared to imagine possible. Thank you all for following this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps me creating these stories for you.